Hello, everybody, and welcome to my latest review of weekly movie reviews. My name is Connor, and this is coming out 8 days after the last one, so not quite weekly. Today, I'm going to be talking about the latest offering from Marvel Studios, which is Black Panther, as well as the latest from Aardman Studios, which is Early Man. These came out last weekend, not this last weekend, but the weekend before last. And they also came out that weekend was Peter Rabbit, I think, or a Samson, the PureFlix Samson, which I did not review, which I'm not going to review. I did not see it. I have Movie Pass, and when I was looking at times for Samson, none of it was supported by Movie Pass. So I don't know if that's a PureFlix thing or what. It seems like certain showtimes are being regulated for not allowing Movie Pass. So I don't know what's really going on there, but I did not see it. I will not be reviewing it. I probably won't be seeing it. I don't care. It looked kind of funny, but I don't want to watch a PureFlix Samson movie. I'm also going to be talking about, since we crossed over into the next week, I'm going to be talking about Annihilation, which is the latest from Alex Garland, the director of Ex Machina. I didn't see Game Night yet, but this has been a real wild little over a week where if you've lived in the Portland area, then you don't know how to drive in the snow. And we've had like snow throughout the last week. Every night it snowed, and then every day it would melt, and every night it would snow again. And well, I wasn't going to risk getting into an accident because I am a Portlandonian and we are wimps when it comes to the snow. So, and then also my car is still trying to fix that up, but that'll be out of the way soon. All that being said, I've had some personal things going on in my mind lately, and I think this might be the last time I will do one of these weekly movie reviews. I'm not going to stop making movie reviews altogether. I'm not going to be doing I'm not going to I will no, I'm not stopping video production altogether, but I got to reassess what I'm doing. And I think this might be a nice way to kind of cap off these weekly movie review things. I wasn't expecting it to take up as much time as it is, and this has been very cumbersome, especially this time of year for me. Anyways, I'm not going to be doing the box office thing because there's really not much to say. Week to week, I feel like I've had less and less to say regarding the weekend box office. But I will say that, I mean, what else am I going to say? Black Panther made over $300 million domestically in 2 weeks, which is bananas. So today's agenda, I'm going to be doing it in the order I saw them. So it's going to go Black Panther, Early Man, and then Annihilation. I got my notes. I have my water bottle, and I am going to start talking about them. So, Black Panther is the 18th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is directed by Ryan Coogler, and it is the first solo outing that we have for T'Challa, the Black Panther, who was introduced in Civil War. This is about his taking the throne, taking over as King of Wakanda, as well as the mantle of Black Panther from his deceased father, who died in the events of Civil War. And there's a lot on his head, on his mind. Stuff is weighing down on him, and he's got to learn what it means to be a king, as also continue to be the Black Panther. People from his past return, Wakanda's past specifically, and we get a little slice of his world. And Andy Serkis as Ulysses Klaue from Age of Ultron makes a return. So I don't really want to I don't know what constitutes spoilers. Everyone in the world has seen this movie, and I should probably say spoilers for everything I'm going to be talking about, as well as if you don't want to jump around, if you don't want to watch all this after the fact and you want to check out, there's like descriptions and timestamp. There's timestamps in the description for what I'll be talking about tonight. So if you are like me, then you walked out of Civil War and you thought, wow, Black Panther is the coolest thing in this great movie. I want to see a movie about him. and then you saw the trailers and you thought this movie looks awesome. So I thought he was the best thing about Civil War. And I remember in my review for Civil War, I had said, I want to see a Black Panther movie yesterday. And this seemed to have everything going for it. It had Ryan Coogler. Chadwick Boseman is like the coolest guy in the world. And he's great as Black Panther. So my thoughts on this movie, I've seen it twice now. I watched it the Friday it came out at like 9 something in the morning on like 6 hours of sleep. And I thought it was good, but it was short of greatness, and I was slightly disappointed in it. And then I'm glad I got that out of my system, and I was able to go see it a second time, because as was the case with Doctor Strange and a few other of the Marvel movies, but Doctor Strange is the one that sticks specifically in my mind. I go and I watch them, and I for whatever reason, I get sort of excited for these Marvel movies like a week before they come out, and then I just don't really get excited. Like the next one I won't be excited for until like a week before. Then I'm going to be like, oh man, I really want to see what the critics are saying about it. And a lot of people were losing their mind over Black Panther, talking about how it's one of the greatest superhero movies ever made, and how it's extremely important and it's extremely special, and all that sort of stuff. And so I was getting excited about it, and then I went and I saw it, and I was a little let down. But the closest comparison I can give this movie is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. And now for a lot of people, that is their favorite Marvel movie. It's not mine. I think when it comes to Winter Soldier and now this, academically speaking, they are like story on a written story level, they are aces. But I have a few filmmaking stuff that bothers me a little bit. And I liked this movie a lot more the second time I saw it, I should probably say. I think on a story level, it's like, yeah, it's still the same story. I was able to appreciate it more now that I knew what the grand picture was. But a lot of the filmmaking stuff I did appreciate more upon a second viewing. So I'm going to get into what I thought. I thought this was a great movie. And one thing that's really neat is, for such a big movie, this is a big blockbuster. It's like 2 hours and 15 minutes long, and there's an epic quality to it. I'll get into that a little bit later, but I saw this movie twice, and both times I saw it, there were relatively decent-sized crowds watching this movie, but it didn't feel like that. This movie kind of deals more into the intimate interpersonal connections of its characters rather than the spectacle. And I think that was probably the smartest way to go, since I think that the action is actually the weakest thing in this movie. But I think that it felt like I was actually watching the movie alone in certain regards, or I was watching it with a very small crowd, because people shut up during this movie. It was wonderful. And the movie was so intimate in certain regards. And so I thought that was really neat. And I thought that was a really cool choice on Coogler's part. On a story level, the core theme of this movie that I got out of it was trust. T'Chaka tells T'Challa in the ancestral plane to surround yourself with people you trust. And the very next thing that happens is we see T'Challa meeting Lupita Nyong'o's character, and meeting Daniel Kaluuya's character, Wakabi. And he knows these people, and he trusts these people, and he's trying to kind of recruit them to be in his cabinet, or advisors to his throne or something. And I like that. One of the things that comes out of this theme that I see is people saying, I give you my word. It's a symbol of trust, I see. And or it's a motif that's about trust. So T'Chaka, well, hold on now. Forrest Whitaker says that he gave T'Chaka his word that he would maintain the lie about T'Chaka's brother. I think his name is Njobu. And T'Chaka killed him because that's the opening scene. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. And T'Chaka killed Njobu, his brother, because he was going to kill Forrest Whitaker's character. And so in order to maintain the lie, he said he would give him his word that he would not, that he would maintain the lie. And then also what is said is T'Challa tells W'Kabi that he's going to get Claw, I give you my word. And then he doesn't keep his word. He goes out and Claw gets away. And that breaks the trust between W'Kabi. He loses his faith. He loses his trust in T'Challa. And so the one thing that I think this movie is ultimately getting through and the way it develops, and that's what I like about this movie, is the themes develop and they build on each other and they keep going. But trust is built on truth, and a good king must be honest and truthful. And then we see that where Wakanda's previous kings have lied to the world. You know, they've put up this front that we're a nation of farmers and we don't actually really exist. And then they're lying about, you know, their vibranium, and they're lying about a lot of things. So at the end, T'Challa rectifies that, and he comes out and he basically says to the world, hey, this is we're Wakanda. I'm the king of Wakanda. Here's what we're all about. And so he's now being honest to the world, but then also he's being honest. One second. But now that they have everything sort of together, he's going to be honest with the people around him, because he now knows the truth. Because you know, the king who preceded him, his father, and all the other kings, they have sort of maintained a tradition that has led to that has eventually led to the creation of Killmonger, Michael B. Jordan's character, who is the cousin of T'Challa. And so at the beginning, before there's a battle, before T'Challa learns the error of Wakanda's ways and then comes back and takes the throne back, there is there's this thing of him unknowingly kind of, how did I put it? T'Challa unknowingly fails because he's continuing to enforce T'Chaka's lie and the lies of those who have preceded him. And that's what is causing him to fail, is because he's sort of leading in ignorance, and he doesn't have all the knowledge he has. And he has that disillusionment in his predecessors, and he has to become his own person and sort of comes into his own. And I think that's all really cool, wrapped up in the theme of trust and truth, and how they're sort of dependent on one another. Also on a story level, I really like the whole Shakespearean soap opera family drama of the element of this. It was real juicy and really dramatic, and I thought that was great. I kept thinking throughout this movie, why couldn't Inhumans be half as good as this? Like, man, it's crazy. I'm the only person who kind of likes the Inhumans, and that TV show was horrendous. It was heinous. And then watching this, you know, as a civilization that's hidden from the world, it's about a royal family, and in a lot of regards, I'm thinking, oh man, Inhumans, you suck so much. But two scenes that I think really work so well in this whole Shakespearean sort of family morality play is we have in scene of Forrest Whitaker revealing the lie to T'Challa, and we have the scene after they all think T'Challa's dead, between Denai Guerrera's character and Lupita Nyong'o's character, where Denai Guerrera says, "I serve my country," and then Lupita Nyong'o says, "I save my country." And those two dialogue-centric scenes, I think, are so they are kind of the best example of that sort of Shakespearean, as I keep saying, soap opera, family drama sort of stuff. They're so dramatic. And one thing that I will say about this, and that the reason I think this stuff works so well, is because Ryan Coogler had a vision for what he wanted to do, and nobody making this movie batted an eye at it. They all took it seriously, and the actors committed to the vision. And everything feels like the lived-in world. I feel like these people come from a place called Wakanda. I feel like I am experiencing a culture from a place called Wakanda, and it's really neat. And that scene where Forrest Whitaker is kind of exposing the lie, you know, he's Forrest Whitaker, he's doing his big dramatic Forrest Whitaker thing, and then The music in that scene is magnificent, and the big swelling music as we're getting the revelations. It's classic stuff. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. It's devastating. And then I think all this stuff is really indicative of Ryan Coogler really shines in dialogue-led scenes. He's an actor's director, and he reveals things through deliberate actions that the people will do. So I'm thinking specifically of that first scene where the whole thing could have been like a really confusing mess of, okay, so this guy's a spy for Wakanda, and he's also the brother of this guy, and then this guy's also a spy who was sent in to spy on this spy, and the whole thing could have just, because it's just a dialogue scene and it's a lot of it's telling and not showing, but there is showing. Oh wow, you probably saw that. That was some saliva that came out. I'm sorry, but there is showing between the weird inner lip tattoo thing that shines. I don't know if I think that's a genetic thing, but I could be wrong. I don't know. But there's the way we show that, and then the way we show the Royal Guard show up, and then T'Challa showing up, and then the way we show the kids outside, and everything does have deliberate showing, but then the way we're telling it works with the showing in a way to where it's well planned out and well thought out. And I think that Ryan Coogler, in these heavily dialogue scenes where actors will do deliberate actions to reveal information to us, is where he shines most. And I think in those scenes is where the good juicy drama sort of stuff comes from. So I think that's what's really good, specifically in Ryan Coogler's approach to direction in this movie. I think I should probably go without saying, but the acting all around the board is fantastic in this movie. There's not really there's one person that I think is a little weak. I don't think it's her fault, but I'll get to her. But the cast is wonderful. Killmonger specifically is a fantastic villain. I think he might be the best Marvel villain. But we've been on a roll, right? Ego was a great villain. The Vulture is a great villain. Killmonger is a great villain. And I think one thing specifically with the Vulture and now Killmonger is they're villains to the heroes who were introduced in Civil War. And it's really cool that we were able to sort of get a feel for these characters who didn't really have origin stories in that movie either. And when it comes to Homecoming and now Black Panther, these are in a way coming of age, coming into your own movies. And it's not about, here's how I got the suit, here's how I got my tech, here's how it's not like that sort of thing. It's not a traditional origin story. And we do spend more time with the villain, and that dynamic is really well defined. And I think that there's something to be said about that. And there's definitely something in that comparison, I think. But going back to the performances, there's a character named M'Baku in the comics. He's Man-Ape. He's a bit of a villain. In here, he's sort of like a king of a fifth tribe who lives in the mountains. And Ape, the gorilla, they call him Great Gorilla at one point. I think that's sort of their nod. And he's great. I don't know who this actor is. I don't think I've seen him in anything, but he has really good comedic timing. But he also is really physically intimidating, and he's got a face that mugging he gives is really good. And he's physically he's kind of stocky, but he's big, and he's really good. I thought he was wonderful. Chadwick Boseman is Chadwick Boseman. He is super cool. Denai Guerrera, I know her as Michonne from The Walking Dead. I shouldn't really say that because I don't watch The Walking Dead. I live with somebody who watches The Walking Dead, so I've seen her around. And I think the only other thing I've seen her in was Tupac's mom from that biopic All Eyes on Me, which was not a good movie. But I think she was miscast or poorly directed, but she was fine in that movie. She is fierce and a powerful screen presence here, and I think she is wonderful. And really, she has like that stoic, dry comedic charm, but she's also tough, and it doesn't feel phony or out of place. And I think she's so good, and they're so confident. There's a confidence, specifically with her, but also in Marvel knowing what they have. And that big money shot at the end of Infinity War, she's in that, running alongside Captain America and the Hulk and everything. And I see that, I'm thinking, yeah, of course. Now that I've seen the movie, I see her there, and I'm like, yeah, she deserves to be there. She worked like lightning for me. It was instantaneous, and I thought she was great. Letitia Wright as what's his face? T'Challa's younger sister. She's a bit of the Q branch, tech whiz, wonderkind. I thought again, like she's great in this movie. She has such a joy about her. She has this light that radiates out of her. Her joy is infectious, and she's so good humored, and her face just lights up. And Letitia Wright, that's a name I'm going to be looking out for moving forward, because I think she really stood out here. She somehow managed to make a Vine joke make me laugh at that. Like, I hate Vine. I hate everything Vine stands for. I think I can't possibly imagine why anyone finds anything in Vine funny. And I should have cringed at that. I know a lot of people don't like the "what are those" Vine joke. Call it her delivery. It worked for me, and I'm surprised that it did. And I think another person that I want to give props to is Daniel Kaluuya. He's not in the movie a whole lot, and he doesn't have a whole lot to work with, but he's got those eyes, and whenever it cuts to him, he just kind of has to do his look, and there's something on his mind. And that guy can act with his face. I think it's cool that he's up for Best Actor for Get Out this year. So good on you. The core cast here is strong. Andy Serkis is so much fun as Claw. I was really sad and kind of bummed that they killed him off. Since he was in Age of Ultron, I figured they'd keep him around as a recurring MCU villain, but it works for this movie that they killed him off. It really does. But I mean, I thought he was wonderful. I could see him just being the main villain, and I'd be okay with it. But Michael B. Jordan does steal the show as Killmonger, and I think he's in this movie the precise amount of time he needs to be, and he's such a strong screen presence. And Michael B. Jordan, I love this guy. I think I even thought he was okay in Fant Four Stick. I've only saw that movie once, and it's not a good movie, and he doesn't have a whole lot to work with. But I remember thinking, hey, he was all right. I'm happy that he's got a real strong director in Ryan Coogler to constantly collaborate with. And it does do the thing where he's, I'm not the first person to even say this, but he is the correct, he's the villain who is right, and he's strong performance. I don't really know what else I can add to it. So when it comes to another stuff I'm going more into the filmmaking elements now. Stuff I really liked here are when it comes to there's that scene, the shot that you see in the trailer of the camera's upside down and it's moving right side up as Killmonger makes his way to the throne. And there's multiple ways to view this. Of course, there is, Wakanda has been turned upside down by this, but also this is the end of Killmonger's journey. He has made it to the throne. And in a way, the camera turning is on a journey from upside down to right side up. And as he is making his final steps into his journey, finishing his journey, so too is the camera. It is finishing its journey as it gets right side up. Also, when it comes to stuff in terms of like artistic heights, in terms of the artsiness present here, I found that the ancestral plane sequences were the best. And I think that's actually the strongest cultural stuff here, where they have to bury you and you come out of a grave in the ancestral plane. Something about that I thought it was real moving and clever. And specifically the stuff, I mean, of course, from a visual standpoint, there's some artsy stuff going on where Chadwick Boseman is wearing all white. And I think this is the place where some of the more noticeable CG and green screen compositing is a lot. It can get away with that since this is some spiritual ancestral plane that they're working on. And that's where stuff, worked for me a little bit better than some of the shoddier green screen compositing and CG stuff that I found in this movie. And then, but the real artsy stuff, I think the artistic height of this movie is when, what's his name? Killmonger goes into the ancestral plane, where he goes to his childhood apartment that his father lived in, that he lived in with his father, and he's both a kid. He kind of jumps between being his kid self and him, adult self, and he's talking with his father. And one of the most interesting things about this is that the way you can read that conversation is that it could be happening now, the way, you know, when T'Challa goes under and he talks with his ancestors. It's very much, this is adult T'Challa talking to adult dead T'Chaka. But these scenes, with the scene where Killmonger's in there, it almost feels like this is a conversation that could be between Ghost Njobu and adult Michael B. Jordan in the ancestral plane, or this could be a reenactment, or this could be a memory between young Killmonger and his dad, and it's like they're sort of like jumping back and forth, like he's recreating a conversation with his father, or this conversation could be happening in the past and in the present. It's hard to really put into words, and it's so wonderful. That, I think, was the artistic height of the movie, and I think that's maybe as artistic as any of the Marvel films have been. And then I have other stuff that I think is here. The music is quite excellent. I think everyone has probably said that. The Killmonger theme is awesome. And as I said, in the Revelation scene where, what's his name? Forrest Whitaker has to reveal the lie. The music in that scene really, really worked for me. Also, going back to Forrest Whitaker's character, I had forgot to mention this, but I think it's really cool. There's some setup and payoffs where he talks about how your father killed his own brother to save me. And then at the end there, he is stopping the son of the man he was sent to spy on from killing the man or the person who saved him. And there's a payoff there where he sacrifices himself to save, in a way, his king. But it's a different king, but it's still his king. And it's I think that's all stuff is really cool from a story element. And Rachel Morrison's cinematography here is really good. Rachel Morrison is the first woman to be nominated for Best Cinematographer, for Best Cinematography at the Oscars. It is actually happening this year. She's right up for it right now for Best Cinematography for Mudbound. I have not seen Mudbound, but she is the cinematographer here, and it's really good. There are certain elements where, yes, it is submitting to the superhero aesthetic and the more blockbuster elements, but there are times for her to really show off, particularly, I think, in the sweeping shots of Wakanda and the way she handles like a brown scale, like those shots of the hills and the fields of the fields of wheat and grass, and the way the light reflects off of them and the clouds in them. It has a kind of like a brown to yellow sort of scale to it, and it's gorgeous. And I'm thinking specifically right now of when Killmonger is dragging Claw into the borders of Wakanda, like that wide shot where he's silhouetted carrying him along. It's really good stuff. So that's really all. That's me lauding all this praise on it. It is a great movie, but I do have problems with this. First and foremost, the action sequences are not bad, but they're not that great either. I think my biggest issue with them is that they are mostly they're a series of medium shots, and that's the frustrating part. There's just a series of medium shots. We don't get a whole lot of wide coverage, and when we do, it's mostly in the CG heavy shots or entirely CG stuff. And there is a lot of unremarkable special effects. I'll get into the visual effects a little bit later, but that's really the main issue I have with it, where we build up this drama so well, but we get to, and I'm mostly talking about the third act, where the big action stuff happens, and it's just the action is. It's dissatisfying when we build up the characters and the story so well, and it's going to explode in this action sequence that is not matching the power of the character drama, and that is a little disappointing. I'm thinking right now of Thor Ragnarok, which I like this more than Thor Ragnarok, but that climax was excellent. It was just an explosion of good choreography, good shot composition, good editing, and everything was just really clicking into place. And I think that ending elevated that movie for me. It was just a rip-roaring good time, but it was also just a really satisfying action sequence. This was like somewhat deflated, I felt. There's one particularly good action sequence where the movie turns into a James Bond movie, where there's a big fight scene in a casino which transitions into a car chase, and that stuff was wonderful to me. Also, one of the best Stan Lee cameos we've had, I think, and that made me laugh quite a bit. I'm going to talk about two actors right now. Angela Bassett, I think, is the only actor who seems to struggle here. Part of it is she's Angela Bassett, and I'm not saying that like that's a problem, but she doesn't look like the mother of a man who's in his 30s. You can put a wig on her or like make her hair white. She just doesn't look that old. I don't know how old she is, but if she is like in her 60s, then she looks great for a late 50s, 60-year-old. She doesn't, it was a bit distracting. Also, she's Angela Bassett. She's a bit of a movie star. And so that was kind of like, I don't know, that's just a me thing. It was a little distracting. But I think the actual thing that is a bit of a problem where she's struggling is it looks like she is putting on an accent, or like she's trying to, you can see it in her face that she's trying to wrap herself around the accent. You can see in her neck muscles like stretching and really working overtime to try to get her mouth around the accent. And then you look at Denai Guerrera and Chadwick Boseman and Letitia Wright, and it just that accent looks so natural coming out of them. It's like, oh yeah, they come from Wakanda. That's the way they sound. Angela Bassett it looks like it not only looks like she sounds like she's putting on an accent, it looks like she is putting on an accent. And just kind of by default, Angela Bassett has a very intense face. And when she has to struggle that much harder to try to, it doesn't look intense. It looks like she's trying too hard. She's a good actress. I'm not trying to shame Angela Bassett. That was the one element where it did feel like she was struggling. So Martin Freeman's also here. It was really good to see him show up. He was also in Civil War. That was cool. He's really charismatic. I like him as an actor. I did feel like his presence was a little extraneous in the third act of, well, we got Martin Freeman here. What do we do with him? We put him in a simulation to go shoot some stuff. And this is the part where it did sort of remind me of the ending of Winter Soldier, where the ending of Winter Soldier is, okay, this just turned into Super Mario 64. There are 3 helicarriers. You have to go around and get to the 3 helicarriers and get the thing. And then we will disconnect them. And it's like, okay, we have to have 3 helicarriers. This is going to get a little excessive, but we can't just get to the 3 helicarriers. We have to have Falcon fight Crossbones. And then we have to have Black Widow doing her thing. And then we have to have Nick Fury doing his thing. And it got a little excessive and a little much. And this, in a lot of ways, is a similar thing. But Ryan Coogler does show a clear understanding in terms of how to structure things, where there are 3 things going on in the climax. And the least important thing is Martin Freeman flying around shooting planes, and then you got the battle in the field, and then the most important stuff you have is the Killmonger. It's the Killmonger Black Panther fight, and he wraps up the least important thing first, and then he wraps up the second most important thing, and then he wraps up. And so there's a series of finishing plot threads. He leaves the most important thing to the end so that you are still invested in that thing. And it's a clear understanding of storytelling, even into the action sequences. So I really like that. But I did feel like Martin Freeman didn't really need to be there. You could have cut out him shooting at the planes, or like just not even had the planes take off at the beginning of the action sequence. And the movie still doesn't lose anything, and it doesn't even really gain anything by having it there. It does feel like extraneous details. So now I'm going to get into visual effects. They're not great. Also, I feel like I've met people from Wakanda. I feel like I've experienced like the culture of Wakanda, but then at the same time, I don't feel like I've actually been to Wakanda. Whenever we are actually in Wakanda, it's we're on the border. So here's a field. We got a big sweeping shot of a CG, look okay, we're in Wakanda. Look at this, the towers, and we're in Wakanda. Big sweeping CG shot. But when we're actually in the borders of Wakanda, and it's not just a field or a big sweeping shot, it's usually an underground bunker, a field outside of a little cliffside that's got a little thing next to it that has an underground bunker, and then like the city's way in the back, or we're outside. Look at, but we're on a cliffside somewhere. We're on a waterfall. You can't really. There's rocks, so you can't. It feels more like an interior than an exterior, or we're in a throne room. And so the only time we're actually inside Wakanda, outside, we are in an exterior location within Wakanda, a Wakandan city. It's just this one street, this one marketplace set, and we use it twice. I didn't get a good sense of place when I came to Wakanda. I got a sense of culture, I got a sense of people, but not a sense of place. And that was a little bit frustrating, especially when the big ending happens. There's a relatively small element of the place of Wakanda is at jeopardy. And I don't understand the place. It does, like I said, it does work when it comes to the culture is at play, because, you know, Killmonger wants to take everything down. He wants to burn it all. And then we got the people are at stake, you know, they're feuding. Okay, I get that. But there is that small element of the sense of place that I'm not getting. And I did find that frustrating. But when it comes to that not getting a good sense of place, and it does come to the shoddy visual effects, I felt like there was like a budgetary limitation on this movie, but it's like, it's a Marvel movie. What do you mean there's the budgetary limitation? They don't have, but they're Marvel. And I was talking with my brother Spencer, and he pointed out something that was really interesting, and I actually agree with him. It's not that they don't have the budgets. I just don't think they have the time. There's a time limitation going on here. And I agree. So you look at Thor Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok was directed by Taika Waititi, who I think had like 2 movies under his belt, and that was his 3rd movie. I know he did What We Do in the Shadows and The Hunt for the Wilder People, and he had like a little over a year to make Thor Ragnarok. And Ryan Coogler made Fruitvale Station and Creed, and I think he had a decent amount of time to make Creed, and now he's making this giant tentpole movie, Black Panther. And yeah, Taika Waititi and Ryan Coogler are unique voices, and they're good filmmakers, and they're probably efficient filmmakers, but they don't have the experience of making a blockbuster, let alone a blockbuster efficiently. So I think as a result, they do have to cut corners because they're not used to making these kind of movies. So there's a bit of a time limitation. Like Captain Marvel just started filming, and that comes out in 13 months. Like those people, same thing. Those are filmmakers that don't have a whole lot of experience making blockbusters. So when it comes to Infinity War, I think it's going to look fine. We have the Russo brothers who are used to doing this thing, and they had a little bit more time to do both of them. But I think a lot of the production elements that are a little disappointing in this movie do come from Ryan Coogler probably not having a sufficient amount of time to make this movie. Also, this is people will have out. If you haven't watched it and you don't care about spoilers, if you didn't like Venom, very constantly to talk, this movie will annoy you because T'Challa constantly like it didn't bother me. It'll another crossed 3 scenes of this movie all hit. This is when I was talking with Ian and Ruben DeBoard, comics on Geeky Gentleman, and it was where he's talking with Lupita Nyong'o in the market, and then the scene where he goes to the Oakland basketball court that the movie opens on, and then the mid-credit scene where he's at the UN, they all seem to hit the same thematic note, and I can't help but feel like you could have made those 3 scenes 2 scenes, and then both the final scene of the movie and then like the mid-credits epilogue sort of thing at the UN both end on a question that he doesn't answer, and a shot where he's sort of at the edge of the frame, kind of it's at a lower angle where he's like, and and then it cuts. And so it does get repetitive. And I found that, okay, it's not Lord of the Rings, but it is one of those, the ending. So that's really all I have to say in regard to Black Panther. It is a great movie, I think. I would put it in similar company with The Winter Soldier, which is a movie most people love. Yeah, I'd give it, all told, I'm giving Black Panther an 8 out of 10. Anybody is tuning in live? I doubt it because I started this an hour and a half later than I said I would. Oh, he's watching. Commented. Doing well. How are you doing, Jeff? All right. And that's it for Black Panther. Now I'm going Aardman's film Early Man. And if I have any viewers really going to care about this movie. But I saw it, so I'm going to talk about it. They did Chicken Run, they did Wallace and Gromit. Their last movie was Shaun the Sheep, which came out in 2015, and this time they gave us a movie called Early Man. So one thing that's worth noting is that Early Man has been deliberately mismarketed. Early movie, a football movie. I'm going to call it soccer because I'm a stupid American. Now, if there's two things that American audiences don't care about, it is soccer and claymation movies. So a soccer claymation movie, if it was advertised as such, opening on the same weekend as Black Panther for whatever reason, then this movie definitely wouldn't have made any money. It hasn't been doing well at the box office, I don't think. And it doesn't even matter that they mismarketed. I saw this in a movie theater all alone. It was just me and my brother and nobody else. So nobody cares. Well, so the story of Early Man is a movie about Eddie Redmayne plays a caveman, and then they're in some crater near Manchester. This is some alternate history sort of take. It's a comedy, and their ancestor. He's part of a tribe whose ancestors created soccer, and then now there is a kingdom that is going to take over their little valley that are in the Bronze Age, and they kick them out of their valley, and then what's his name? Eddie Redmayne says, "Hey, we're going to challenge you to a soccer duel or a soccer match, and if we win, then we'll get our valley back." And that's the movie. So the best thing about Early Man is that it's charming. Stop motion animation has an inherent charm to it, or at least it does to me, and it does seem to have an inherent charm to a lot of people. If you like, what's it called, stop motion animation, I wouldn't necessarily recommend you check this out in the movie theater, although you probably have because you want to support it. But if you don't really, if you're curious about this, I'd say if you like stop motion animation, check it out on Netflix when it inevitably comes to Netflix. The voice cast is good, specifically Tom Hiddleston as the villain. I say that the best thing about this movie is that it's charming. The best thing about it is really Tom Hiddleston. He is doing a voice, and it's really, really funny. Most of the things he said had me chuckling because he's doing a goofy voice, and he's actually playing a character. And who knew Tom Hiddleston would be a real good voice actor? At least in this movie, he is. And Eddie Redmayne, I think, is also good. He also sounds nothing like Eddie Redmayne, but he's doing a solid job. And this movie, if you like dad jokes, they made a 90-minute movie for you. It has a lot of Flintstones-esque puns, visual gags, and lots of dad jokes. So if you like that and you find that sort of stuff kind of humorous and charming, I can find that sort of stuff humorous and charming, then you'll probably find enjoyment in this movie. And there's a charming quietness and quaintness and simplicity here. There is a lot of people kind of running around and freaking out, but it's not like an assault on your senses noise fest that makes you want to cover your ears and close your eyes like an Ice Age movie. I can imagine a lot of kids finding this boring. So That's just kind of it's very British. It's kind of dry in certain areas. It's not trying to be the most funny thing you've ever seen. It's constantly throwing little quips at you, but it's not trying to be like a joke per second, 21, 22 Jump Street that's trying to make you laugh at all times. The thing, though, is that Early Man is mostly unremarkable. There is nothing here you haven't seen before, and that's not inherently a bad thing. It's just unremarkable. So if this movie kind of charms you and it works for you and it gets under your skin and you're just having a good time with it, you won't mind that there's nothing really going on here that you haven't seen before. This movie, I don't really care about sports movies all that much. I don't particularly care about soccer because, you know, I live in the US. So, yeah, I saw this stuff and I'm like, nah, okay, it is what it is. So now I'm going to get into like the actual negatives here. The jokes are hit and miss. I say that, you know, the movie isn't trying to make you laugh at all times, but there are a few jokes that just didn't land. There's a giant duck joke that is like legitimately hilarious to me. Like dinosaurs came from birds, so let's have a giant dinosaur-like duck. Great, I found that funny. But there's a joke with a dial with like a messenger bird that got a little old, and then there's a color commentators that both have the same name that are spelled differently. Found that a little old. I didn't find that funny from the get-go. So the jokes I found to be hit or miss, and I think another thing that the movie kind of minds for comedy, but also dramatic story beats, are a lot of the side characters, and these side characters are so dumb to the point of kind of being annoying. It's almost like if ever, you know how in like SpongeBob, like after like season 3 or something, all of the characters were just monumentally stupid. It was like they were all Patrick Star. That's sort of what is happening here. It's sort of funny at first, but after a while, it's like really annoying. And there are some like legitimate story problems here. The one example I'm going to use here is the love interest. Okay, so the whole premise of a scene is built around, there are guards around the soccer stadium. So we need to sneak into the soccer stadium. And so they find a way to sneak in, and then Eddie Redmayne bumbles and then causes a lot of noise falling down all of the stairs and then lands in the soccer stadium. And then there's the love interest sort of practicing soccer when she's not supposed to be there. How did she get there? When I was watching the movie, I figured, okay, there's probably going to be a situation where the guards are going to come in and then she's going to go, hey, follow me. I have a secret passage to how I got here. There isn't that, and it's never really brought up. And when the whole premise of the scene is built around, we need to find a way to get in, and then a character is just miraculously there, we sort of need an explanation for that. And it could have maybe been funny. It's just kind of a little bit of a glaring inconsistency. Also, in that very same scene, he notices her practicing, and then he steps on a squeaky sign, and then she's like, hey, who's there? Did you not hear him just fall down, screaming, hitting all of those chairs? It's just weird little things like that that kept popping up that I found to be kind of weird inconsistencies in story. And I know it's a comedy, but just because it's a comedy doesn't mean that it can't have a consistent story. I also just wasn't really that invested in the drama of these characters, but somehow or other, and I think it's just by the sheer magnitude of, I think, the decent storytelling in the animation here, because, I mean, it's claymation, it's Aardman, they're good at what they do. I found the climax to be legitimately exciting. So, yeah, I guess I'd go with a bit of a lukewarm recommendation. I'd say maybe rent it if you like this sort of stuff. I'd give it a 6 out of 10. Lukewarm recommendation. All right. I'm going to drink a little bit. Any new comments? Nope. All right, let's move on to Annihilation. So, Annihilation is the latest offering from writer-director Alex Garland. Alex Garland, who has been a screenwriter for a while now, I think sometime in the mid to late 90s. He wrote 28 Days Later. He wrote The Beach. He wrote Dread in 2012. And he wrote and directed, it was his directorial debut, was Ex Machina from 2015. And if you saw my best and worst movies of 2015 videos, then you know that I loved Ex Machina. It was in my top 10 of 2015. I thought it was kind of remarkable and featured excellent acting from Oscar Isaac and Alicia Vikander specifically. So this time around, it's an adaptation of it's a loose adaptation from what I understand of the first novel in a trilogy of books. And it stars Natalie Portman as a character named Lena, whose husband, played by Oscar Isaac, goes into a place called the Shimmer, and he is the only known survivor who makes it out. And then she and a group that includes the likes of Jennifer Jason Leigh, Tessa Thompson, Gina Rodriguez, and a couple others. I think there's maybe one other. Tuva Novotny. They all go into the Shimmer and just go see what's in there. And she says she has to know. So then they go in there. And there's a little bit of alien here. There's a little bit aliens, I should say. There's a little bit of aliens here. There's a little bit of Blair Witch Project. There's a little bit of a lot of stuff, but it's also very much its own thing. Okay. The closest comparison, before I say anything, I just want to say that I think it's cool that a studio put this movie out. This movie is Garland's pure, unadulterated, unfiltered vision. And they put it out, and this movie gets crazy. At least this is probably really high-heady, thinking man sort of stuff for mainstream audiences. And this is probably going to be really boring for some people. This will be a little much for a lot of people. And I think mainstream audiences are probably not going to really respond to this, or maybe think, whoa, that was kind of weird, right? And then move on with their life. The closest comparison I can give this movie is Darren Aronofsky's film Mother, where that is a movie, it's basically somebody's art house movie that the studio just put out. And I think this movie's probably going to do better at the box office than Mother did. Pardon me. But I do think it's cool that it was put out. But even on like story things and also how I feel towards the movie, I respect this movie and I'm glad it got made, but I didn't like it. That's not to say I didn't like it, but I did not dislike this movie, but I also didn't like it. I'm very mixed on this. I have really complicated feelings about this movie. Like Mother, I feel like this is a movie that is a metaphor, and then it just sort of, there's no reason for there to actually be these characters and this plot and really a story, because it's just, I feel like it's just an excuse for Alex Garland to ponder concepts and kind of get into things that aren't really on the screen, but he's using stuff on the screen as symbols and metaphors, and having characters just sort of ponder things that are on his mind. So much so that I'm like questioning why I'm even watching the movie. But I'm going to get into that maybe a little bit later. That's kind of most of the comparisons I have to Mother. But I'm going to start with some surface level. I do like stuff about this movie, and I will get into it. But most of what I like about this movie comes at the end. So I'm going to start with the surface level complaints I have regarding this movie. And I got to be honest, I am shocked, stunned, and amazed to report that the acting in this movie is pretty bad. Specifically from Jennifer Jason Leigh, Gina Rodriguez, and Tuva Novotny. I think Tessa Thompson and Oscar Isaac are good in this movie when they're actually in this movie, and all else are just kind of serviceable, kind of blank slates. Natalie Portman is just fine in this movie. Benedict Wong is in this movie for some reason. So I don't understand what on earth Jennifer Jason Leigh and Gina Rodriguez were directed to do, because I know that Jennifer Jason Leigh is a great actress. She is Daisy Domergue in The Hateful Eight. But whatever creative decision Alex Garland had, or maybe she had, it just wasn't working to me. She seemed like she was really laying it on thick. And from the get-go, a lot of these actors are just sort of doing their thing, but laying it on thick. Gina Rodriguez is sort of a bubbly personality, but kind of a scientist and an academics type. There's also a detail that she's a lesbian that never comes back up again, and no one ever really comments on. And I don't understand what the reason of even bringing that up was. The same way it's like I don't understand why we even had to know anything about these characters. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I know why the thing we know about all these characters is that they've all had something bad happen to them, and then everything that we actually learn about them from their past somehow ties into that. And early on, that sort of like there's some details about characters that are revealed that don't actually impact their tragic backstories, and they're never brought up again. So they're just sort of extraneous details that don't inform character really at all. And so I question why they're even there. And the dialogue is pretty bad. And so that's a little piece of why I think the dialogue is bad. But also, like, the way Gina Rodriguez specifically, I think she's kind of awful in this movie. And I don't think it's her fault. I think it's Garland's direction. There's a scene where they're looking at a camera and like somebody gets their stomach cut open. There's like weird tentacle intestines. And then she's like, oh, no, that was a trick of the light. That's a trick of the light. She's sort of in denial about it. And they say, well, why don't we just rewatch the clip? And she's like, well, no, I don't want to rewatch that. And so it was like, the way she delivered it, it felt like a sitcom. And like they only had like one or two takes to get it right. And like I never got a sense of character just from the way she spoke, the way she carried herself. She almost sounded like she was reading these lines for the first time and just sort of figuring them out on the fly. And Jennifer Jason Leigh, almost like she's sort of supposed to be the cold, detached person, and all of her lines sort of land flat, and she's like constantly messing with her hands. And she's sort of like, she has some sort of OCD compulsion. She is like maybe got a social disorder, and it's all laid on so thick. And then Tuva Novotny is about as wooden in this movie as you can possibly get. I was amazed at some of the lines she had to deliver of like, is it our minds that are being lost or just mine? And it's just completely flat and vacuous. And so much of this movie is built around hanging out with these characters, but the movie's not really a character study. It's an idea movie. And so hanging out with these characters and really spending time and sort of learning things about them feels needless. To me, anyways, it felt pointless. And I like slow-moving, kind of meditative films that are kind of delving into heady, out there concepts. I really do like that sort of stuff. And I'm fine with movies that are just sort of, they bring characters in, they give them a loose framework to work with, but it's not really about the characters. It's not really about the framework they're working in. It is really just sort of about the ideas and seeing images and hearing sounds and the things people say inform your sensory experience. And it's like having a dream and being transported. And I do think in the transportation immersive element of this movie, it does succeed. But these are sort of movies that I do really like. I just don't think it's successful here because we do spend a lot of time with characters, and then they're just not well realized at all. Let's see. So, getting into the dialogue, so much of the first two acts are preoccupied with explaining concepts and blatantly dropping like thematic puzzle pieces on your lap. You know, oh, here you go. Remember that? Chew on that. And then later we're going to bring in something that'll bring us back to that point. And then I think that when we have so much time with characters and people interacting with one another, we need to have those thematic puzzle pieces and explaining concepts sort of incorporated into a natural dialogue, into a casual conversation. And I think the movie fails at doing that. So those are my big problems with the first two acts. But there's also issues I have regarding the way the movie looks. I was talking to my good friend Jackson Rasco. I think people who watch me kind of know who he is from Geekvolution. Me and him are talking about this movie. He liked this movie a lot more than I did, and I'm glad he did. I'm glad people do like this movie because I wish I might not like this movie all that much, but I do want to rewatch it, and I do think that if this movie is successful, we'll get more movies like it, and when we get more movies like it, we will get better movies, also worse movies, but also better movies. I should probably let it be known that my opinion on this movie might be hindered by the horrible movie-going experience I had watching this movie. So I might need to rewatch it again. But I do think the thing I'm hitting on would be things that I would still have issues with under a better circumstance in viewing. I think the movie's kind of ugly. A lot of the stuff before we get to the shimmer. By the way, was this movie based on like a young YA anti-grown-ups type movie where everything has a very ominous one-word noun, like the shimmer, Area X, that's the lighthouse. I know it's an actual lighthouse, but it sounds kind of ominous, and it's got thematic relevance because like illumination and lighthouse, and it's in the distance. Go to the light. Anyways, whatever. But before we get to the shimmer, it's kind of like, I don't know what cameras they shot on, but it doesn't capture shadows and darker, like, and dark black levels in the environment really well. Everything sort of has this fogginess. There's a bit of a haze. Things are sort of reflective in it, and it almost feels like there's like a soft focus to it. It's all so artificial looking to me, and it doesn't even like resemble the real world at all. And I don't think it captures dark lighting or low lighting very well at all. Even when we get into the shimmer, there's my brother specifically pointed out, and I remember this shot where I think it's Tessa Thompson. She's like holding against the, oh, this is kind of heavy. Like the window behind her is in focus, and it's he had pointed this out, and I agree with him, where the cinematography feels like whoever did the photography on this movie is probably a photographer and doesn't have a whole lot of experience doing cinematography, or is like a painter or somebody who has a firm understanding of composition but isn't used to working with moving pictures. Now, I'll probably go and look at this cinematographer's body of work and love their previous work, but just based on what I saw, that's the impression I got. So even when we get into the shimmer, like, it's more colorful, but there's just this weird awkwardness and kind of like low quality to it. It's not just like a lower budget element. It's like somewhat unprofessional. And I found that really, really irritating, especially since I think Ex Machina is a beautiful looking movie. It's really sleek, and the lower lightings in that movie is gorgeous. So those are predominantly my big issues with the movie. I did like things about this movie, so now I'm going to get into the things I like. The concepts and a lot of the ideas here are really good. I wish the story that rooted down this stuff was given more attention and wasn't abandoned, but the concepts that Alex Garland is clearly trying to get to the heart of are legitimately interesting. They're not anything new, but the way Garland presents them are interesting and are somewhat unique and are very much his lens. He does, homage. There's a shot where Natalie Portman enters the crash site that looks something like right out of Aliens. She's got a gun and she's got a tank top on. It's a narrow hallway that's sort of like, it's all black with all these designs on the walls. It looks like Alien, and he's like trying to homage a lot of things in here. And I think that's kind of cool. There's a lot of very interesting visual motifs. So the movie sort of gets started with the concept of all life coming from a single cell. You came from one cell, and that cell duplicated, and those 2 turned to 4, those 4 turned to 8, those 8 turned to 16, those 16 turned to 32, those 32 turned to 64, and so on and so on and so on. And there's the ideas brought up of, death theoretically is a flaw. That's like a design flaw. It's a glitch, because cells should just reproduce forever and ever and ever. And then just brought up the idea of God and how, if God is an entity made up of like cells, then he didn't die. He just kept growing. And then we get the shimmer, and the shimmer started out small and it's just been growing exponentially. And so in my head, I draw the connection between God and the shimmer. And I'm glad I talked with Rasco about this last night. And I'm going to bring up things that he had said in that. If you're watching this, Rasco, hello. But through discussion, we were able to sort of get to, I felt like the whole like religious element was sort of dropped. I wish this sort of religious element came up in one of the characters. That might have been a cliche, but I don't care. It would have connected the characters to the themes in a way that might have meant something, instead of nothing. So when we think about God and specifically, you don't have to be a Christian or anything, but just in terms of like mythic allusions and biblical allusions, we think of God as a creator. And then we think of like Revelations and the end of all things, the destruction. But then we think of like new heaven, new earth, that sort of stuff. God as a creator. And then if this shimmer in and of itself is like a stand-in for God of some kind, then, or as an extension of God, things aren't, and then it's said in the end, and I wish this wasn't in the trailer, but there's not destruction. Things are changing. We are making things new. And so when that early talk about God is sort of represented in biology changing and like, plants and mammals sort of becoming one, and biology and geology and everything just sort of changes. That is kind of an interesting thing, and sort of observing this change by like the 2 deer with like the flowers growing on their antlers moving in sync with one another. It's like this new thing. And then since we have that single cell growing into more things, there's the opposite of that sort of creation. There's the annihilation, everything getting completely removed down to its base thing. The eradication of all things. And we see Jennifer Jason Leigh like burn up into burn it up into like light. But we see that but their biology is starting to change. We see Natalie Portman test her blood and see that her blood cells move, and then there's one that is her old blood cell and one that is clearly her new blood cell. And one thing that is pretty neat is that at the end, when she's looking into this weird, like crazy looking thing that gives birth to like her doppelganger, like blood moves from her face, and we see that speck of blood that we in our minds associate with that what she was testing on as like, we see that as like a single cell version of herself. We see that grow into an alternate version of her. And so in the end, all things that are created end up getting burnt down and destroyed, and it is the end of all things. It is annihilated. So I think all that's sort of interesting, but that's all thematic and kind of under the surface, and that's fine to have it under the surface. I just wish that if you're going to build a foundation for the story that you want to build on top of, make sure the foundation works, and the themes and the story sort of work in tandem with one another, so that the story of these women going into this environment in and of itself is more than just some neat action sequences and ponderous dialogue, so that I'm more motivated to look beneath the surface of what's going on. I really wish that were the case, but instead there is all this interesting stuff happening under the surface that I don't really want to go back to really dig deeper in, because the characters and plot just don't work for me at all. there's nothing to really sink my teeth into to anchor me so that digging deep is satisfying. So I guess I said that, you know, they didn't do anything with the characters. They didn't do anything with the side characters, I don't think. But there's there is Natalie Portman, and we find out that she had an affair. Now, this is where my interpretation of the ending comes from, is that, and I like this movie the more it went on, and I like the last act in this movie a lot because people didn't really talk. Like, the characters didn't talk in the movie, and it was mostly a sensory experience. The sound design in this movie rocks, by the way. That is the best thing in terms of immersion, is the sound in this movie. The visuals, I really don't like the way this movie looks, but the sound rocks. And because it became more artistic and it was just showing you visuals and giving you sounds, and it was like a David Lynch sort of thing, like Part 8 of Twin Peaks: The Return, where it's just an onslaught of images and sounds and recurring motifs that you're given, and then you sort of draw your own conclusions to it, and you have your own emotional response to it, and it feels special to you, and it means something specifically to you. And I like that. That's the reason I'm a big David Lynch fan. That's why I think the ending of this movie is the best part of it. It's because people don't tell me what I'm supposed to think. And of course it is informed by what comes before, but I still think you could have done exactly what you covered, the same ground you covered beforehand, and still have it work in that final act. But once we get to the stuff with Natalie Portman, you find out that she has an affair. Her husband is Oscar Isaac, and he comes back at the beginning of the movie. But then we find out that he was replaced by, like, presumably his doppelganger. Natalie Portman, sort of a doppelganger is created out of her, but it doesn't look like her. I guess somewhere along the line earlier, when Oscar Isaac went into the Shimmer, he met a doppelganger of him, or a doppelganger of him was made. And then he killed himself, and then that doppelganger went out into our world and found Natalie Portman, his the first Oscar Isaac's wife. And then we find out that she had an affair when he would go out on missions, and then there's like some kind of self-loathing and self-hatred regarding Natalie Portman because of the affair, and she calls it off because she says that Oscar Isaac knows about the affair. Now, my interpretation of this whole ending is that this whole thing is just a big metaphor for the grief that she has and the self-loathing she carries in herself regarding the affair, especially afterwards. Like, and the Shimmer is a force of change. And when Oscar Isaac finds out about the affair, he goes into the Shimmer, and he becomes literally a new person. Oscar Isaac is not the Oscar Isaac who first went in there. He's now come out a new person. It is that knowledge of the affair. He has come out a new person. And when it comes to Natalie Portman, she goes in there and she has to face herself. She has to face a mirror version of herself. And it's created of her. And her first instinct is to attack it because she doesn't like herself. And then but this is also a version of her that is like willing to fight against. There's the her who is willing to cheat on her husband, and there's the physical manifestation of the her that she hates, and then there's her. And then she sets the version of herself that she doesn't like ablaze, and then she comes out not changing into the person that is okay with cheating on her husband, but comes out a person who's willing to stay with her husband. And so in the ending, she holds onto him, and both of their eyes glow. And I think that ending is supposed to signify that they are one now. You know, they have come together, and they have both been through something. He has literally changed into a new person, and she has been changed emotionally by the events. And it is more like these feelings and emotions sort of visually expressed. There's a lot of David Lynch in this movie, right? Doppelgangers, people getting replaced by other people. I wish the movie was more emotionally driven, though. It's very dry. There's a lot. I sense a lot of Denis Villeneuve influence in Alex Garland's style, particularly Arrival. I don't think this movie was made specifically because of Arrival. I thought about it for a little bit, but I don't think that's what's going on. Um, but I wish that the movie was more open and held on to, like, wore its emotions on its sleeve. And I get that these people are sort of like jaded, but that doesn't mean that they aren't emotional. People who hate themselves, and this is just from personal experience of people I've known and stuff. People who don't like themselves are kind of reserved and put off. But once they get, once you crack that surface, they are willing to express themselves more than, because they bottle it all up. And so I wish we got more of that. And a lot of people are just really stoic, and stoic to a fault, I think. I don't feel like people responded like, they're like, oh my God, that's a giant bear. But then in the next scene, it was like, oh, back to business as usual. And I'm okay with the dreamy quality of everything, but you can still have a disorienting, dreamy, otherworldly feel that's also emotionally driven and impacts the viewer emotionally. As before mentioned, David Lynch makes movies. I did like scenes in this movie. I like the bear scene is great, and it's creepy, and it's kind of scary, and it's shot like a horror movie where they're all strapped. It's like a grindhouse movie, strapped up to a chair, and it's gore's going everywhere. It's kind of like an artsy version of like a splatter movie, and I think that's kind of neat. But all that being said, though, that whole scene is built on, whew, thank God that bear just so happened to do that right before Gina Rodriguez started killing people. I think that in terms of I think that once Gina Rodriguez and that bear scene happens, the movie gets like great. I think that's where the third act really gets going, and it does get great. I like Tessa Thompson's exit from the movie, where you see like out of her like needle marks in her arms, like plants growing out of it. And then it starts growing at an exponential rate, and then she leaves behind a tree line, and then Natalie Portman calls her name and runs out, and then you don't see her. She could be one of those, people-shaped plants. She could not be. She could be any of them. She could not be in that bunch. Who knows? And that was exactly the way I wanted them to do it, because like doing that type of body horror thing immediately after doing the scary bear scene, that would have been inappropriate, I think. But all that being said, I walked out of this movie and I looked down at my hands, and I did feel like I had been transported. I did feel like I just got back from a dream or back from an adventure. And it was very immersive. It was successful at that. Alex Garland is a good storyteller, and he's a good filmmaker. Even if I think that a lot of his storytelling choices, both with the camera and on a screenplay level, were, it aimed big, and I felt it missed big in a lot of elements. But I also really respect this movie, and I can't call this a bad movie. I don't like it. I really want to. I want to see this movie again, and I probably like it more. I keep saying that, but pardon me. Lastly, I'm going to talk about hands in this movie, because things being shot through other clear things and hands came up everywhere in this movie, and I don't really know what to make of it. Jennifer Jason Leigh is always messing with her hands. When Gina Rodriguez introduces herself to Natalie Portman, she interlinks her hands. Within cells interlinked, within cells interlinked, within cells. And then, like, when Natalie Portman is comforting Oscar Isaac early in the movie, she's moving her hand across his hand, and it is shot through a glass of water, so it is obscured. Later in the movie, other things are shot, hands are shot through the prism of water. There are shots where people are sort of behind glass. People are behind a plastic wrap. People are behind the shimmer. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of that sort of stuff. And I didn't pick up on what that could possibly mean the first time. Again, on a second viewing, I could probably really get that. I felt like the hands thing was altogether dropped, but I also felt like the God thing was altogether dropped. And after talking about it with somebody, I was more warming up to that. And I did feel like it was, not a profound thing, but it really thematically underkept that whole movie on a religious element. I wish it was more strong with the characters, but it was still there. I'm going to give Annihilation a 6 out of 10. Check it out. you will probably not like it, but maybe check it out as a matinee. Well, that'll just about do it for me tonight. I don't think I'll be coming back for another one of these. Sorry, but that's just, I think, the way it's gotta be right now. If anyone is going to be... Oh, whoops. Yeah, no one's commenting. I started this an hour after I said I would, naturally, and I have no subscribers. Anyways, that'll do it for me. I don't think I'm going to be doing another one of these weekly movie reviews. School is ramping up. I got personal issues going on, and I thought I would have more time to do this, and I thought things would be going differently in my life. They're just not. Oh, well. I'll still be putting out videos every once in a while. I want to do a best and worst 2017 list, and I'll probably do movie reviews and in-depth analyses of movies that aren't new releases, and I'll probably just kind of put out reviews and videos on stuff that I want to do, and maybe some editorial type things where I talk about like my favorite filmmakers and my favorite films and stuff like that. But I got to reprioritize stuff in my life, particularly what I want to get done, where my life's got to go from now. But thank you all for watching if you did watch this, and see you around.